Hey Mystics, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the Ascendant Descendant axis and what it means in our synastry when we have this axis conjunct. So as always, I have my two little disclaimers. The first is, even though this series is called Synastry Aspects for Soulmates, I really mean just whatever word you use for those deeply impactful relationships. They can be very short-lived, they can be long-term. I'm not even talking about duration. I'm just talking about those relationships that really, really impact your life in powerful ways. That's my first disclaimer. My other disclaimer is about synastry aspects as a whole. Today I'm talking about angles or axes, and I was last week too with the vertex axis conjunction. Card up here for that. These axis conjunctions carry a lot of weight in synastry, but it's still not everything. You have to look at your synastry as a whole and not focus too much on individual aspects other than understanding what they bring to the table. Your relationships need to be looked at with a wider lens. Not so much focusing in on one aspect and then using that to describe the whole relationship. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm sitting in a rocking chair, so I'm going to try and not rock. It's very hard to do. Okay, so the Ascendant-Descendant axis is sometimes nicknamed the magnetic axis. So let's start talking about the ascendant and what that is. The ascendant, sometimes shortened to AC, is also called your rising sign. You probably have heard of that. So your ascendant is the sign and exact degree of whatever sign was on the eastern horizon at the moment and location of your birth. And it marks the cusp of your first house. And a lot of people sort of abbreviate what the ascendant or rising sign means, and so you may have heard that it's how people see you or the mask you wear. To go a little deeper with this, your rising sign or your ascendant is the mask you wear. It's also how you interact and react to life. It's your first reaction, generally, to people in life. It's like the suit you climb into to show the world. It often represents the qualities that we want the world to see in us. It doesn't mean that we aren't these things, but it's kind of how we choose to showcase ourselves. And as the cusp of the first house, it also represents what we look like, and how people see us. For example, I have Sagittarius rising, but I'm actually really an introvert. And Sagittarians are generally very social, very optimistic and adventurous, and I am those things, but I'm a major introvert. And people who have known me for a very long time, if they hear me say that I'm an introvert, they kind of mock me and don't believe me when I say that. You are not an introvert, Ananda. You are the most social, life of the party person I've ever seen. And that's how I interact with life, but it exhausts me. And this is because they see this mask that I'm wearing that has them believing that I am a total extrovert, which is not the case. Okay, let's get into the descendant a little bit now, sometimes shortened to DC. The descendant marks the cusp of the 7th house, and the 7th house is the house of marriage and partnerships, one-on-one relationships, also other things like open enemies and things like that. It is ruled by Venus, so that kind of makes sense. The simplified explanation that you may have heard about what the descendant or DC represents is that it represents your partner or who you are destined to partner with. And, you know, there is something to that, but I want to go a little deeper with you. Think of the descendant as the parts of you that you don't want the world to see, or the mask you don't want to wear. It's the parts of ourselves that we struggle to accept and struggle to love. And isn't that kind of perfect when it comes to relationships? This kind of brings in the concept of how relationships can really be a spiritual path in a way, because in these qualities, when we see them in our partner and we love them in our partner, we are inadvertently learning to love and accept these qualities in ourselves. And this is the gift of this axis conjunction. This conjunction is like glue, like magnets. Opposites attract completely. So let's take a look at what this looks like in a chart, in a Synastry chart. If you don't have your Synastry chart, I'll put a card up here to my tutorial so that your chart can look like the chart I'm working with. Sometimes that's very helpful to have it look the same. I've found that to be very helpful when I was learning astrology. Okay, so let's take a look at how this looks in the chart. And as I said a moment ago, I have drawn up this chart exactly the same way as I show you in my tutorial how to get your Synastry chart for free. So I either put a card up earlier, or maybe I'll put up a card now. Link is also in the description box. Okay, so let me get the chart up. Okay, so in this example, the wife is in the blue, the husband is in the red. I usually put either the wife, the feminine partner, which has nothing to do with gender, or my client, the one that I'm focused on, I tend to put in the center. That's just a little side note of how I sort of keep track of who's in the middle and who's on the outside. So the blue is the wife in this example, the red is the husband, or feminine and masculine. Hold on one moment. Apparently one of the dogs wants in. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Trying to record with 4 dogs is sometimes a little challenging. Anyway, so here we have this ascendant descendant axis conjunction. Specifically, each partner's ascendant is conjunct the other partner's descendant. So here, in this chart, the descendant is not marked. We just know that it's the opposite point on this axis. So if we're just focusing on the blue person here, her ascendant is right here and her descendant is right here. And if we go down, So her AC is at 22 degrees of Leo. That means her DC, her descendant, is at 22 degrees of Aquarius. It is always in the opposite sign because it's an axis. So if your rising sign is in Cancer, your descendant is going to be in Capricorn. If you are Virgo rising or Virgo ascendant, your descendant is going to be Pisces. It's always in the opposite sign. I'm a Sag rising, my descendant is in Gemini. So the same thing here. The husband's ascendant is right here, and so we know his descendant is the opposite. So his ascendant is 23 degrees Aquarius. So his descendant is 23 degrees Leo. So this is a very close conjunction. It's within a degree, within 2 degrees. So with the axis conjunctions, or with anything conjunct an axis, you can use up to 6 degrees for a conjunction of the axes. I like it to be closer. I like it to be within 2 or 3 degrees, but it can be felt up to 6 degrees, sometimes even 8 degrees, although that's generally much wider than I like to work with. Just depends on the situation. So you can see here, I mean, of course, we're only talking about the ascendant and descendant axis in this example. But if you look here, because the husband has this, he has Venus and Sun conjunct his ascendant, all of those things are also conjunct his wife's descendant. That brings extra oomph to this conjunction. But just this ascendant-descendant conjunction alone, it does a very interesting thing in the chart. If you look here at the houses, and even if you don't know anything about the houses, I think this is going to make sense. So if the ascendant is the cusp of the first house right here, and the descendant is the cusp of the 7th house, when you have this ascendant and descendant conjunction, it means that all of the houses for the whole chart are conjunct to their opposite house, which really highlights this magnetic quality to this conjunction. So here we have the house of self and the house of the other, house of the partner. Here we have the house of daily life and daily service, conjunct the house of spiritual life. I mean, it's the house of romance and creativity and the love we give, conjunct the house of love we receive. I mean, it's just beautiful how this brings these two magnetic energies of these people and locks them in place. This gives them a sort of extra ability to overcome the challenges that come with marriage. Sorry, there was a fly. It doesn't mean that their struggles are less than other people have in their relationships. I'm sure that, you know, marriage and relationships are difficult. It's hard to overcome a lot of the things that we are faced with when it comes to marriage and partnerships. But this conjunction, ascendant-descendant conjunction, will give a couple extra juice to push through those very difficult times. And you will often find these people stay married for a very long time. This particular example, they were married within 6 months of knowing each other. They've now been married for 20 years. I recently did a session with a couple who had been married for 33 years, and they had this same conjunction. And now these are not easy marriages. Like I said, it doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that they tend to stick to it. They are magnetically stuck to each other in a way that's very hard to pull apart. You know how hard magnets are to pull apart once they are locked into each other. This is very much like that. So I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions at all about this, or if anything that I've said about the houses or anything is confusing, or you need clarity, please leave me a comment and I will reply to your question. And thank you so much for being here. As always, thank you for clicking on my video. There's so many other things you could be doing with your time. I really love that you're here with me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Galactic Mystic. You can also visit my website. I'll put a card here for that. And you can also join my Facebook group called Galactic Matrix Mystics, where we do a lot of astrology, tarot, mysticism of all sorts. It's a very intimate group, so if you're into really getting to know a small group of people who are talented astrologers, tarot readers, and oracles in their own right, and share the magic of using these gifts. All right, be well.